My dear woman, if you cannot dance and cannot converse, one wonders what possible use a ballroom is to you. Perhaps a chair by the fire, with the other furniture. Hallam Ryecroft, 5th Duke of Mereworth, heard that from the shadow of the gallery stair with his gloves still in his hand, and the rein of Grosvenor Square still on his shoulders. And for the space of one breath, the whole glittering room went perfectly silent to him, the way a battlefield is said to go silent before a man does something he cannot take back. He had come straight from the Lords. He was 2 hours late to his own grandmother's ball, which was the ball at which his wife of 4 months was to be presented to London for the first time, and the man speaking was Lord Brackwell, and the woman with her back to the gallery stair, standing very straight with one hand on the silver head of a plain blackthorn cane, was Elspeth. Hallam's grip closed on the banister until the wood complained. He did not go down. Afterwards he could never entirely account for that, except that he saw his wife's shoulders settle, and he knew that particular settling. He had seen it the day the Mereworth Tenants Committee tried to talk over her, and the day the bishop's wife asked whether the estate school might not be better managed by a man. "Lord Brackwell," said Elspeth, in a voice that carried without being raised, "you have mistaken the sequence of events, so allow me to set it straight for the company, since they are listening. I did not say that I could not dance. I said that I would not dance while you were being uncivil to Miss Hobbs." A ripple went round the nearer part of the room. Somebody's fan stopped. "Miss Hobbs," Elspeth went on, "is companion to Lady Averil, and has been standing by that window for 2 hours because she was told to hold a shawl, and when she stepped aside to let you pass you told her that the wall was for wallflowers and the corner for those too poor to be either. She is not able to answer you. Her situation depends upon her not answering you. So I have answered you, and I would do it again, and now you are angry, which I find I can bear." "You presume," Brackwell said, and there was heat in it now, the ugly kind, a great deal, for a woman nobody in this room can name. Half the season has been asking who the Duke of Mereworth found in the country, and why he keeps her there. Now I look at you, madam, I believe I can hazard the reason." Hallam came down 2 steps, and stopped, because his wife had begun to speak again, and her voice had not changed at all. "Then let me spare the season the trouble of guessing," said Elspeth. "My name is Elspeth. I was schoolmistress at Mereworth for 6 years, and my father bound books in Cheapside before that, and when I was 14, a garden wall came down in a storm and took my hip with it, and I have walked with a stick ever since and shall until I am buried. I can stand for 2 hours. I can teach 40 children their letters, and I do. I can waltz badly, and I can reel not at all, and there is no cure for it, and I have not wanted one for some years." She tilted her head very slightly. "What I cannot do, my lord, is understand a man of your rank who arrives in a room full of people and looks about it for the one person least able to strike back. That is a want of imagination I would not permit in a girl of 9. The silence that followed was not the polite kind. Hallam had sat in the Lords through debates on the Corn Laws and never heard anything like it. Brackwell's face went from white to a mottled red. "You will not lecture me. Whoever you are, whatever the Duke keeps you for, you are nobody, and I will not be." "She is the Duchess of Mereworth," said Hallam. He had not planned the words. They came out of him quietly, from 6 steps up, and the whole room turned as one animal. "And she is my wife," he said, coming down the last of the stairs. "And she has just told you her name, which is more courtesy than you have shown any woman in this house tonight, including my grandmother, whose invitation you appear to have mistaken for a license." Nobody moved. 200 people in silk and superfine, and the candles going in the chandeliers overhead, and Lord Brackwell of Brackwell Hall standing in the middle of it with his mouth open. Hallam did not look at him again. He crossed the floor to his wife, and he did not hurry, because hurrying would have made it a rescue, and he had understood something on that staircase that he had not understood in 4 months of marriage. He stopped in front of her and bowed. Properly, the full bow, the one his father had used to the Queen. "Your Grace," he said, "forgive me. The division was called twice, and I could not get away, and I should have been at the door with you, and I was not." Elspeth looked up at him. Her gray eyes were bright and steady, and only he was close enough to see that her hand on the cane's silver head was not quite still. "You were on the stair some while," she said. "I was." "Why did you not come down?" "Because you were speaking," said Hallam, "and I have never in my life heard anything I wished more to let finish." Her mouth moved then at one corner. He turned. 200 faces waited to be told what tonight was going to be. "Lady Averill," he said, and found her, a plump, alarmed woman in puce near the card-room. "Your companion, Miss Hobbs. She is to be given a chair, a glass of negus, and no shawl to hold for the remainder of the evening, and she will take supper at my grandmother's table, where I shall be glad to be presented to her." A pause. "You will not, I think, wish to be the second person in this room to disoblige my wife." Of course, your Grace." "My Lord Brackwell." Now he did look. "You have petitioned my interest 3 times since March. The living at Netherstoke for your brother, the canal bill, and a word in a certain quarter about your eldest son's regiment. My answer to all 3 was to have been given to you on Thursday." Brackwell's throat worked. "Your Grace." "It is given now," said Hallam. "You will find no interest of mine anywhere you go, not this session and not the next. My solicitors will write to you tomorrow about the Netherstoke advowson, which as it happens is in my gift and not in yours, and I shall be presenting a curate who was a foundling and is worth 10 of you." He let that sit for a moment in the hearing of the whole room. "And before you leave this house, you will go to that window and you will apologize to Miss Hobbs. Not to me. Not to the Duchess. To the woman you thought could not answer you, loudly enough for the people who laughed. You cannot compel a gentleman." "No," said Hallam, "I cannot. The door is behind you and the choice is yours entirely, and every person here will know which you took." Lord Brackwell stood a long moment in the ringing quiet. Then he turned and walked to the window, and it was not gracefully done, and his voice shook, but he did it, and Miss Hobbs, 29 years old and a companion since she was 19, received in front of 200 people the first apology of her working life. The orchestra, which had been frozen with its bows up for some minutes, was signaled by an elderly dowager in the corner and began, hastily, a quadrille. Hallam offered his wife his arm. "You have ruined a man's season in 4 minutes," Elspeth murmured as they went out through the pillars towards the cooler air of the conservatory. "And mine, I fear, is only beginning." "Yours has not been touched." "My love, they will talk of nothing else for a fortnight." "They will talk," said the Duke of Mereworth, "of a bookbinder's daughter who told an earl's son that he wanted imagination, and was right, and did it without once raising her voice." He looked down at her. "Let them. It is the best hour's work done in this house in 30 years." The conservatory was warm and smelled of orange trees and wet stone. Elspeth sat down on the marble bench under the lamp, and let out a breath she had plainly been holding since the gallery stair, and set her cane against her knee. Hallam did not sit. He stood with his back to the glass, and made himself say the thing that had come to him on the staircase. He asked why the Duke of Mereworth keeps you in the country. He did. It was a vile way to ask a question that half of London has been asking politely. Hallam turned his gloves over in his hands, and the answer, Elspeth, is not that I am ashamed of you. You know that. I know it. The answer is worse. The answer is that I knew tonight would happen. I have known it since the day we married. I have sat in that chamber for 15 years with men like Brackwell, and I know exactly what they do with anything they have not seen before. And I thought that if I kept you at Mereworth among people who know your worth, they could not do it to you. He looked at the black glass and his own reflection in it. So I put off the presentation in April, and in May. And in June, I told my grandmother the roads were bad. Elspeth was quiet for a moment. Hallam, she said, do you know what I did on the morning after our wedding? You went to the school. I went to the school, and Tom Vibbert's mother asked me whether it was true that I should be too grand now to hear the little ones read, and I said that it was not true, and I have heard them read every Tuesday since. Nobody in Mereworth village has ever once decided for me what I could bear. She turned the cane so the silver head caught the lamp. And then my husband, who loves me, spent 4 months deciding it. Gently, with the best will in the world. Do you see? Hallam Ryecroft, who had that evening broken a lord in front of 200 people, without raising his voice, found he had to sit down after all. I made it a kindness, he said. You made it a cage with a very good view. Yes. It is the only unkind thing you have ever done to me, Elspeth said, and you did it out of terror, and I have forgiven you for it 3 times already tonight, so you may stop looking like that. He took her hand, she let him keep it. He had first seen her from horseback 9 years before, when he was newly come into the title, and riding the Mereworth boundaries with a steward he had not yet learned to distrust. A young woman in a brown dress standing in the rain in the ruin of the old estate schoolhouse, arguing with a carpenter about a beam. The steward had said, "That is the schoolmistress, your grace. She is a nuisance about the roof." Hallam had ridden on. Then he had turned back, because she had not curtsied and had not stopped arguing, and because the carpenter was wrong and she was right. 6 years of Tuesdays after that. Reports in her clear hand about slates and primers, and a boy called Ash who ought to be sent to a grammar school and was, and paid for out of Hallam's own pocket at her asking. He had stopped pretending to himself somewhere in the 4th of those years, on an autumn afternoon when she had walked the length of the long gallery ahead of him, slowly, unhurried, entirely without apology. And he had realized that he had been arranging his week around a woman who limped and did not care who saw it, and who had never once asked him for anything for herself. His grandmother had guessed before he said a word. His cousins had not stopped talking since. He had married Elspeth Ray at Mereworth in March in front of the whole village and 40 of his tenants, and precisely 11 members of his own family, and had never for a single hour regretted it, and had then, out of love and fear, hidden her. In the conservatory the music changed. Somewhere beyond the pillars, the quadrille ended and a slower measure began, 3/4 time, unhurried. Elspeth's head came up. "That is not on the program," she said. "No, my grandmother has views about programs." Hallam. "Waltz badly with me," said the Duke of Mereworth, standing and holding out his hand. "You said you could. It is the only qualification required." In front of them. In front of all of them. And slowly, and you may lean on me the entire time, and if you wish to stop after 8 bars, we shall stop after 8 bars and walk out through the middle of the floor as though we had planned it. And tomorrow your hip will punish you for it, and you will sit in the yellow room and be vile to me all day, and I shall bring you the newspapers and read them aloud. She looked at his hand for a long moment. "You have thought about this," she said. "Since March." Elspeth Ryecroft, Duchess of Mereworth, left her cane against the marble bench, and put her hand into her husband's, and went back into the ballroom on his arm. The room, which had spent a quarter of an hour deciding what tonight was going to be, watched the Duke take his wife into the middle of the floor at half the proper speed, one hand at her waist, taking rather more of her weight than the dancing masters would have permitted, and it watched her look up into his face and laugh at something he said, and it watched them turn, twice, slowly, alone on 20 yards of parquet under 4 chandeliers. They stopped after 20 bars, not 8, and walked out through the middle of the floor as though they had planned it. The applause began somewhere near the card room with an old admiral and went round the whole room in a wave, and Hallam thought that London was the most fickle place on earth, and that he would take it, tonight, and be grateful. At supper Miss Hobbs sat at the dowager's right hand and was asked her opinion of the fish, and gave it. By the following Thursday she had received 2 offers of better situations, and had taken the one at Mereworth, where the Duchess wanted a second pair of hands for the school and a woman who knew how to hold a room while holding a shawl. Lord Brackwell went into Shropshire in July and was not seen in town for 2 years, and what was said of him after that night was said by other people, and did not need the Duke's help. The curate, who was a foundling, was presented to Netherstoke in September, and buried 3 generations of that parish, with great tenderness. And at Mereworth in the autumn on a Tuesday, Hallam stood in the doorway of the estate school with his hat in his hand, and listened to his wife hear Tom Vibbert's youngest read a page aloud, stumbling 4 times over the same word, and Elspeth saying, again, and no hurry, and again. Afterwards he walked her home the long way, along the wall that had been rebuilt, past the orchard, at her pace, which was his pace now, and had been for some time. "You never asked me," she said, "about the engraving." "What engraving?" "Inside the silver band. You had it made for me, and gave it to me on our wedding morning, and you have never once asked whether I found what is written in it." Hallam stopped walking. "You have had it 4 months, and said nothing." "I have had it 4 months, and read it every morning," said Elspeth, "and I wanted to see how long a duke could hold his tongue." She turned the cane in her hands, and held it up so the low sun ran along the metal. "So that no room is entered alone. That is what a man wrote to a bookbinder's daughter, and then he was so afraid for her that he nearly forgot he had written it." "I have not forgotten it since Thursday last," said Hallam. "I do not intend to again." "No," she agreed, "you do not." She took his arm. "Although you should know that I can enter any room in England alone, my love, and did and shall." "I know it. I would simply rather not." He put his hand over hers where it lay in the crook of his arm, and they went on along the wall in the last of the light, unhurried, the whole slow length of it. And the Duke of Mereworth thought that of everything he had been given by blood and by fortune, and by the accident of a great name, the thing he would have gone to any lengths to keep was the sound of a stick on gravel keeping time beside him, all the way home.